What's going on? ESPN Analyst gets destroyed for disrespecting Larry Bird. Or disrespecting Bird?
Larry Bird is highly regarded as one of the 10 best players in NBA history. He was highly skilled, a great scorer, as well as a great passer.
He had great IQ, a great feel for the game. That's one of the best things you could say about Larry Bird. He had a great feel for the game. He knows how to play basketball, like actually play basketball, you know? He passes the ball just to get it right back. Things like that. Like, he plays great basketball, bro. I love watching Larry Bird play.
To their overall success.
Just things like that.
Now,
things like that.
Being said,
you know,
Larry Bird,
just playing basketball out there, man.
Legends, is losing respect as time goes on. And when it comes to ESPN, I was absolutely floored to see a former NBA player insulting Larry Bird and saying point blank he is not one of the greatest shooters in NBA history.
And I think the NBA has gotten way past the balance and watching guys give up dunks to shoot threes on fast breaks. That kind of thing. I think that has hurt the game a lot. Now, that's me. I am old school, as we all know. JJ, perfect. But, you know, Bird shot plenty of threes. And they had Parrish and McHale. Bird shot plenty of threes. The best. And Bird is one of the great shooters in the history of the sport. Not even close.
Bird shot threes. He never was a volume shooter from three.
No, I know that. But he was a great three-point shooter. He was not good. He was great.
So, stopping that clip right there, Reddick, at the very end, had the facial expression of someone who was annoyed and disgusted by Larry Legend being called one of the best shooters of all time.
I don't think he was just annoyed or disgusted, man. He's looking at him like, you sure about that? Like, that's more the face he was giving. Like, you sure about that, bro? I don't think you know what I'm saying? You be dragging it, Uncut. Stop dragging it, bro.
It might be hard to understand that players in the past were also great players. But for him, he is so preoccupied with boosting up today's players, he downplays and disrespects past eras, like Bird, Cousy, as well as Jerry West. Now, getting on to the actual argument, Larry Bird, in his era, there was a three-point line that was introduced his first year. But for middle school, high school, even college, he had no three-point line. That is some very important context a lot of fans either don't know or try to ignore. And one more thing I do want to add, when Bird came into the NBA, he was actually a power forward who played primarily on the block. And despite that, in his first year in the NBA, he shot 40.6% from behind the arc. In terms of percentage, he ranked third in the NBA. He was fifth in total threes and sixth in threes attempted. As a rookie off the bat, Larry Bird was the best three-point shooter in 1980. And what makes it even more impressive, out of the qualifiers for three-point shooting, he was the only power forward to make the list, once again proving how much of a unicorn he really was.
He's one of the top 5 three-point shooters of all time. That's how good Bird is. Oh, yes.
We're not
three-point shooting contests. He was phenomenal. Bird's a great shooter.
Wait a minute,
and Bird didn't shoot.
Bird is absolutely one of the greatest shooters ever, but he's not one of the top 5 3-point, top 3, whatever you just said.
Did you see the three-point shooting that he put on, those clinics that he put on at the All-Star game?
Again,
did you watch?
Doggy, it's just math. It's attempts, it's makes, and it's percentage. And there's no way you could ever argue Larry Bird is a top 3 3-point shooter of all time. You can't make that argument.
You're basing it on math. You're basing it on math and a time of when he played. I'm basing it on just shooting.
Now, looking at JJ in this clip, he once again provides no context, saying, quote, it's about makes, attempts, and percentage. Looking at the raw numbers.
That's a fact, Uncut. Because you just put the Joe, my son was 6 in attempts. Back then, he's shooting a lot.
With no context,
that's shooting a lot of threes back then.
And no additional information. That argument right there, going on stats alone, is highly disingenuous. For example, look at the mid and early 2000s. Back in that era, averaging 30 points was extremely difficult for people like Kobe, Allen Iverson, and even T-Mac. Being knowledgeable NBA fans, we know that era had a much slower pace, the paint was more crowded, and scoring
the defense was crazy.
More difficult. We're looking at the raw stats with no context.
Back then.
Players in today's league averaging 30 were more efficient compared to Kobe, as well as Iverson. And like Reddick said, it's makes, attempts, and percentage. Someone like SGA, off the pure raw stats, was a better scorer than peak Iverson. And someone like Tatum technically was more impressive in the early 2000s Kobe. My overall point being, stats like usual require context.
Yep.
The same thing goes to Larry Bird.
You know what I'm saying?
And his shooting percentage.
I'm sorry to fuck with you, Uncut.
And speaking of that percentage,
sorry to fuck with you, my boy.
Bird, after 1984, when he stopped playing power forward, his overall shooting splits were highly impressive. Shooting 50% from the field, 39.8% from 3, and 90% from the line.
That's tough.
During that time period, 5 different times he shot above 40% from 3, and his highest season was at 42.7%. And going year by year, in 85, he was 4th in three-point makes, 86, he was 1st, 87, also 1st, and 88, he was 4th. For peak Larry Bird, from 85 to 88, he was 1st in threes made, 1st in threes attempted, and 4th in three-point percentage. For his overall era, in terms of volume and percentage, he was the Steph Curry of the late 1980s.
Bird is a unbelievable.
Again, we had this discussion the other day. We had this discussion the other day about James Naismith. James Naismith invented the game. You were rewarded for putting the ball in the basket. There's plenty of people that have shot more, made more, and guess what? Made more at a higher percentage than Larry Bird from 3. I'm not saying Larry Bird is not one of the greatest shooters ever. He's not one of the greatest three-point shooters ever.
Yes,
you cannot make that argument.
Yes, I'm sorry. Because the 80s is so much different. There's physicality, the way they guarded people. You couldn't.
Can we get off
I've been trying to make a point.
Seriously,
I've been trying to make a point for you, Doug.
So once again, Reddick has 0 historical context and wants to make basketball black and white and about percentage and stats. And looking at Larry Bird, like I said before, he was one of the pioneers for the high-volume three-point shooters from day one in the NBA. And for a big man, he was especially unique in his time because most forwards didn't dare step out to shoot threes. And Bird's overall influence, much like Steph Curry, had a big effect on the game going forward. For guys like Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Durant, and even Jason Tatum. And one thing I do want to nail home, in 1980, three-point shooting was a gimmick and a joke for most coaches. But for Larry Bird, in a 5-year period, he legitimized it, was shooting upwards of 40%, really not knowing what he was doing for his time. And like I said before, peak Larry Bird was an elite and all-time great three-point shooter. As from 85 to 88, he shot 41.4% from behind the arc, when the league average was 29.5%.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to make that argument. Uncut. Compare his three-point percentage to the league average. That just shows you Bird was on a different time. You know, I bet the league average for three-point percentage shooting is way higher now. Shit like that.
Once again, showing Bird
that just shows.
Was light years ahead of the curve and was a unicorn for his time period.
Dominating his competition. Yeah, like you gotta put some respect on that. Like, come on.
And one more thing I do want to reiterate is stats with your context. As any average Joe off the street can look at a box score, look at a percentage, and read it and tell if it's good or bad. But a real smart NBA fan, what they do, they look at the context, the peak, and the overall era. As looking at raw stats as a simpleton, someone like Kobe and his career stats aren't as impressive as Damian Lillard when it comes to scoring. As Dame compared to Kobe, averages more points, a higher true shooting percentage, higher three percentage, and higher free throw percentage. Would anyone in their right mind say Dame Lillard was a better overall scorer than Kobe? Because looking at the numbers, remember, makes, attempts, and percentage, Dame Lillard, in fact, was a better scorer.
Making a great argument, my boy.
At his absolute peak in the playoffs, he was phenomenal. As an 86, he averaged 25.9 points,
another 50, 40, and 90
8.2 assists on 52, 41, and 93 splits. For NBA history, Larry Bird was the first player ever to have a high-volume 50, 40, 90 postseason run. And since Bird, only KD and Kawhi have joined him on that list.
Let's say Steph Curry, for example.
Right.
When I watch Steph Curry off the ball in a playoff game,
he's great.
getting grabbed and held by Marcus Smart, they're attached to him at all times.
Right.
Then when I watch Larry Bird come off a pin down and no one's within 5 feet of him and they're shooting the gap, you're telling me one is more physical than the other? You're telling me that's more physical than Steph Curry being grabbed and held for 48 minutes?
Wait, what is he about to say right now? Yo, JJ, don't try to make that argument now. Now you just bugging out. You about to try to say this era is more physical than the 1980s. Are you dumb? Just sound like a
now
what?
stopping Redick right there. When talking about any era of basketball, there are always good defensive teams and bad defensive teams. But for Redick, when it comes to Bird's era, he only focuses in on the bad defense, compared to Steph's era, where he totally ignores the bad defense and the awful teams like Houston, Charlotte, and San Antonio. And as a basketball fan on YouTube, it takes about 5 minutes to find Larry Bird playing against very physical defense who grabs him, holds him.
Yo, bro, we even really react to Larry Bird getting it on with niggas because they out here wilding. What is Jacob Redick gotta be tight, because what is he talking about? You know what I'm saying? My son Larry be ready to scrap over this shit. They be real. What? Come on, bro. Larry Bird really, bro. We got a whole fight compilation of watching Larry Bird getting into straight fights, 8 minutes long. You talking about it's more physical? Shut the fuck.
Double teams him.
That boy is chatting.
Shots and he's shooting space. And when speaking of the 80s,
my boy Larry really,
yo
boy,
Rodman, Joe Dumars, the Lakers,
right on him. Somebody's right on him. He rising up above him. What are you talking about?
Jones,
JJ Redick acting like he Ed or something. I ain't gonna lie. I don't like that.
Moncrief, Buck
Acting
Williams.
dumb.
You had great defenders on all-time great defensive teams. And just like Redick, I could cherry pick bad plays here, bad plays there, from any era. At the end of the day, it makes no sense doing that. You have to watch the film, understand the era, and provide context to what you're watching. Yes, back in the day, they played very close and compact to the basket. That's because back then, they didn't know the value of three-point shooting. But someone like Bird was a pioneer and an innovator of three-point shots for big men and just players in general. And one last thing I do want to throw in there, looking at Larry Bird, Mad Dog Russo brought up the NBA Finals. For Bird in the Finals, for his career, in 5 trips collectively, he shot 42.2% from behind the arc. When it came to clutch time play, in the final 5 minutes, shot a staggering 42.8%. If you look at three-point shooting for Larry Bird, at the biggest times when the stakes were highest, he elevated his game and rose to the occasion. And like Pat Riley said, Larry Legend is the guy you want taking the shot when the clock's winding down. So that right there is my last overall point. And when it comes to Bird, I personally think he's a top 10 shooter of all time. If you want to say top 5, I definitely wouldn't push back too heavily given his era and how good he was for his time period. And for Redick, as you guys know, I am not a big fan of him or his takes regarding past legends.
I ain't gonna lie,
We're
gonna see more about JJ, see what he got to say about some more other NBA legends. But what he just said, I think he was trying to get to a point that Steph Curry plays better or more physical defenses. Boy, you must not know. Larry was really getting it on out there. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? They falling down. Nigga about to break his back. My son trying to punch on something. Like, what are you talking about, boy? JJ, you lucky you wasn't out there with Larry. Larry would have did you bad. So, like, I ain't gonna lie, you talking crazy about Larry. Larry probably would have punched you in your shit. For real. But if y'all enjoyed this, make sure y'all click on the last reaction, turn on post notifications. Links in the description, man. And I'm out of here.